the Wendigo's call. The arduous expedition of the troop of hunters, the snow-clad wilderness, had been taking place for an indeterminate number of hours. The objective was to unearth the ultimate location to establish their encampment, but as the sun commenced its descent, they abruptly realized that they had lost their way. The pitchingly cold wind cut through their thick garments while the snowflakes started accumulating on the ground. It was evident that they had to seek refuge before the onset of nightfall. Nevertheless, the impenetrable forest divulged no hints as to which direction they should pursue. Just as they were on the verge of relinquishing hope, a hair-raising, bone-chilling howl reverberated through the woods. It was an unprecedented noise that seemed to have arisen from a different realm. The hunters were petrified, and their breaths were coming out in fitful gasps. One of the hunters, a grizzled old-timer by the name of Jack, instantly recognized the sound. The Wendigo, he murmured in a voice that trembled with fright. The Wendigo was an entity of folklore, a malevolent creature that roamed the forest, mercilessly slaughtering any humans that crossed its path. Jack had heard of it when he was a child, but had never envisioned encountering it himself. The group clustered together, praying that the Wendigo would not notice them. However, the howling amplified and grew closer until it seemed to be emanating from right behind them. Suddenly, a silhouette emerged out of the darkness. It was towering and emaciated, with flesh tautly stretched over its bones. Its eyes radiated an eerie red glow in the dim light, and its mouth twisted into a macabre grin. The hunters tried to flee, but the Wendigo was too nimble, seized them one by one and dragged them into the woods, their screams reverberating throughout the night. Jack was the only one left standing. He knew that he had no chance against the Wendigo, but he refused to surrender without a struggle. He unsheathed his hunting knife and lunged at the creature, determined to bring it down even if it meant sacrificing himself. The Wendigo let out an ear-splitting roar and charged at Jack. They collided on the snow, with the hunter's knife clashing against the Wendigo's claws. Nevertheless, the Wendigo was too mighty. It subdued Jack and pulled him into the darkness, where he joined the others in its stomach. As the sun emerged on the horizon the next day, there was no trace of the hunters or the Wendigo. It was as if they had vanished without a clue. However, the people residing in the nearby town were aware of the truth. They knew that the Wendigo had claimed its latest victims and that they would have to exercise extra caution the next time they ventured into the woods. The Wendigo's curse. The couple, a young and ambitious duo, had always longed for a life of tranquility and solace. Away from the chaotic humdrum of the city, they stumbled upon a cabin, a dream come true. It all started with an ear-splitting howl that reverberated through the wilderness, an eerie melancholic cry that persisted every night, intensifying each passing day. The couple disregarded it, assuming it was merely an animal of the forest, but the howls persisted, louder and more vehement than ever before. As time elapsed, the cabin's environment became eerie and peculiar. Objects shifted independently, doors slammed shut without any explanation, and the atmosphere grew icier by the day. The couple tried to rationalize the events, but their gut feelings suggested otherwise. Something was awry. One fateful night, the couple woke up to a ghastly sight. A Wendigo stood at the foot of their bed. Its eyes glimmered in the dark, its breath a hot, noxious vapor. They attempted to scream, but their vocal cords failed them. The Wendigo grinned malevolently and vanished without a trace. From that moment, the couple was cursed, haunted by the creature that plagued them relentlessly, driven to madness by its howls. They tried to escape the cabin, but every time they neared the exit, the Wendigo appeared, blocking their paths. The days stretched into weeks, and their sanity deteriorated. Consumed by fear and misery, the Wendigo's curse ensnared them, a curse from which there seemed no escape. Finally, the Wendigo appeared before them. Its tongue menacing and grave. "You are mine. You cannot flee. You are mine forever." The couple acknowledged its truth, powerless to thwart the curse. As they watched the creature vanish into the void, they realized that they were destined to spend eternity in that cursed cabin, shackled to the creature's howls, ensnared by terror and hopelessness. Months passed, and the couple's physical appearance reflected the curse's toll. They had wasted away, their complexions sallow, and their eyes sunken, their hair turned white, an indication of the tremendous stress and perpetual horror they endured. Once a happy couple, they now resembled a shadow of their former selves, entrapped in a never-ending cycle of terror and despair. And then, as the Wendigo's howls intensified, the couple realized that they had to take matters into their own hands. They knew they couldn't overpower the creature, but they could try to lift the curse. They scavenged the cabin, searching for anything that might aid them, and eventually stumbled upon an old tome tucked away in a murky corner. It was an ancient manuscript filled with spells and incantations, promising to banish evil spirits and lift curses. The couple had nothing to lose, and they began to chant the incantations, their voices trembling and unsteady. As they recited, the cabin convulsed, and a blinding light filled the room. When the light dissipated, the Wendigo had vanished. The couple staggered out of the cabin, gasping for fresh air. They stood in the clearing, realizing they were free from the curse, liberated from the dread and misery that had entrapped them. Years passed, and the couple never forgot their ordeal. They continued with their lives, but the memory of the Wendigo's curse lingered, engraved in their minds. They shared their story with anyone who would listen, warning others of the dangers lurking. The Wendigo's feast. Amidst the dense and murky wilderness, replete with rustling leaves and a lulling ambience of serenity, a group of 5 intrepid campers had set up camp, blissfully unaware of the looming danger that lay in wait for them. Little did they know that the treacherous and insatiable Wendigo had laid claim to these woods. As darkness enveloped the horizon, the campers huddled around the warmth of their crackling fire, exchanging ghost stories and roasting marshmallows. In a sudden, piercing moment of terror, a hair-raising howl rent the air, causing them to freeze in abject fear. It was unmistakable. The Wendigo had arrived, their minds awash with panic. The campers scrambled to pack up their belongings. But alas, it was too late. The Wendigo had pounced, for too quick and robust for them to escape. In a series of gut-wrenching snatches, the beast devoured each camper one by one, leaving no trace behind. As the night wore on, the only camper left alive cowered inside their tent, riddled with fear. Outside, the Wendigo prowled with its piercing, luminous scent fixed upon its prey. The camper knew that their demise was imminent. Just as the Wendigo was preparing to attack, it let out an ear-splitting roar and charged at the tent. But suddenly, a cacophony of sounds erupted from outside. A group of boisterous men shouting and firing their rifles had arrived. The hunters had descended. The Wendigo was now faced with a new adversary, and it diverted its attention towards the hunters, giving the last camper a chance to flee. The camper ran for their life through the winding and dark woods, their lungs heaving with exertion, until they finally stumbled upon the hunters' camp. There, the camper learned the grisly truth about the Wendigo. A creature cursed and born of cannibalism and greed, preying on unsuspecting intruders, devouring their flesh and seizing their souls. The memory of the Wendigo's gruesome feast lingered on in the camper's mind, and the haunting sound of its howls still reverberated in their dreams. They knew they had been lucky to survive the encounter, but they also knew that the terror of that night would forever be etched in their memory. The Wendigo's hunter. The hunter had heard the stories of the Wendigo since he was a young boy, but he had never believed them. The tales had always seemed fanciful and far-fetched, like something out of a fairy tale. It wasn't until he stumbled upon the remains of a family torn apart by an unknown creature that he began to take the legends seriously. The sight of the carnage was both gruesome and fascinating, and it stirred something primal within the hunter's soul. He knew then that he had to act, that the Wendigo had to be stopped. With his trusty rifle in hand, the hunter set out into the forest, following the trail of destruction left by the creature. He walked for hours, his footsteps echoing through the dense underbrush. The sun beat down upon his back, making him sweat profusely. But the hunter did not falter. He was determined to end the Wendigo's reign of terror, no matter what the cost. As the hours ticked by, the forest grew darker and more foreboding. The shadows lengthened, and the howls of the Wendigo grew louder and more insistent. The hunter pressed on, his heart pounding in his chest. He was afraid, but he was also exhilarated, for he knew that he was facing his greatest challenge yet. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind him, and the hunter whirled around, rifle at the ready. But there was nothing there, just the darkness and the eerie howl of the Wendigo. The hunter's senses were on high alert, and he knew that he was being watched. He gritted his teeth and pressed on, determined to face whatever lay ahead. The forest seemed to come alive around him, the trees rustling and creaking as if they were alive. The howls of the Wendigo echoed through the trees, taunting him, daring him to come closer. The hunter did not back down. He raised his rifle and fired, the shot echoing through the forest. But the Wendigo was too quick, and it eluded him once again. The hunter continued on, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. He knew that he was getting closer, for the trail of destruction left by the creature was becoming more pronounced. Suddenly he heard a low growl, and he knew that he had found the Wendigo. With a steady hand, the hunter took him and fired. The shot echoed through the forest, and for a moment, everything was silent, but then the howls began again. Louder than ever before, the hunter knew that he had only wounded the Wendigo. It would take more than one shot to kill it. He prepared to fire again, but then he heard something behind him. He turned, rifle at the ready, but it was too late. The Wendigo was upon him, its hot breath on his neck. The hunter struggled, trying to break free, but the Wendigo was too strong. It lifted him effortlessly, and the hunter knew that he was facing his worst nightmare as the creature brought him closer and closer to its gaping maw. The hunter knew that he had failed. He had come to kill the Wendigo, but instead, he had become its latest victim. As the Wendigo's teeth closed in around him, the hunter's final thought was of the people he had failed to protect. He knew that the Wendigo would continue its reign of terror, and that he had been powerless to stop it. The forest grew silent once more, as the Wendigo feasted on its latest victim, and the darkness consumed everything in its path. The Wendigo's revenge. As their nocturnal sojourners descended deeper into the dense forest, their merriment steadily gave way to apprehension. With each footfall, the shadows seemed to stretch out and along, casting an ominous foreboding over their nocturnal escapades. After setting up camp, the group's impish ringleader proposed a joke at the expense of their unwitting friend. Under the cloak of darkness, they emitted a cacophony of ear-piercing howls, mimicking the fabled Wendigo's call. Unbeknownst to them, their seemingly innocuous antics would soon unravel into a nightmare of horrific proportions. In a thundering response, the Wendigo unleashed a deafening howl that echoed throughout the forest. Its eye was roused, and it was bent on retribution for the impudent jest. The teenagers scrambled for cover, but it was too late. The vengeful Wendigo was hot on their heels, pursuing them with a relentless ferocity. As they raced through the tangled undergrowth, their hearts pounding with fear, they could hear the Wendigo's howl chasing them with an unyielding intensity. With each step, the teens grew more exhausted, and the Wendigo's inexorable pursuit was unrelenting. Eventually, the beast caught up with them, and the hapless victims were ensnared in its merciless clutches. Its razor-sharp teeth rending flesh from bone, the Wendigo feasted on their helpless bodies with a frenzy that was both gruesome and macabre. The following morning, search parties scoured the woods for any sign of the missing teenagers, but their efforts were futile. The only evidence of their fate was the chilling howl of the Wendigo, a somber reminder of the perils of tempting the unknown. In the weeks that followed, the townsfolk spoke in hushed tones of the strange happenings that had beset their once peaceful community. People claimed to have seen the glowing eyes of the Wendigo peering from the darkness, and the sound of its haunting howls echoed through the night. Despite the warning signs, there were those who remained defiantly skeptical of the legend, dismissing the tales as mere folly. Little did they know that the Wendigo was watching them, patiently waiting for its next opportunity to strike. And strike it did, with a ferocity that left the town in a state of disarray. Panic gripped the community as the Wendigo's reign of terror continued unabated, with each attack more savage than the last. It wasn't until a group of intrepid hunters took up the gauntlet to confront the beast that it was finally brought down. The fight was long and arduous, with both sides sustaining grievous injuries, but ultimately the Wendigo was vanquished. But the legend of the Wendigo persisted, lingering in the minds of the townsfolk long after its demise. Its chilling howl still echoes through the night, a haunting reminder of the dangers of tempting the unknown, and a cautionary tale of the perils of dismissing the age-old wisdom of folklore.